working as a software engineer and raising my son Marcus. My father had been a mechanic his whole life, teaching me that good people build bridges while troublemakers build walls. That philosophy was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. The first warning came from Mrs. Miller down the street, who whispered to me over the fence one afternoon, with genuine fear in her eyes. At their old place, they sued someone over dog barking, she said, glancing nervously toward the twins' house. Won $2,000 and forced the family to move. These aren't normal people, David. I should have listened more carefully to that warning, but I believed in giving everyone a fair chance. My father always taught me to assume the best in people until they prove otherwise. Unfortunately, Sandra and Monica were about to prove themselves in spectacular fashion. Within their first week, the twins established a reign of terror that would make dictators proud. They blasted music at all hours parked at the Beast, to deliberately block neighbors' driveways, and screamed at delivery drivers who couldn't navigate their confusing house numbering system fast enough. I watched from my kitchen window as Sandra reduced a teenage pizza delivery driver to actual tears because he was 5 minutes late, while Monica stood beside her, filming the whole confrontation on her phone and cackling like it was prime entertainment. The sweet Mrs. Evelyn, our 80-year-old widow neighbor, started crossing the street to avoid walking past their house. The entire neighborhood was walking on eggshells, afraid to provoke the wrath of our new self-appointed police. But the real war began when they set their sights on my mailbox. It wasn't just any mailbox. It was a beautiful wooden post that my son Marcus and I had built together 3 summers ago when he was 16. We spent an entire weekend on that project, helping me get the whole
Jesus!
in a rich forest green that complemented our house perfectly. Dad, this thing's gonna last forever, he'd said with pride as we stepped back to admire our handiwork. Now Marcus was away at college studying engineering, just like his old man, and I'd promised him over our weekly phone calls that I'd keep everything exactly as planned. That promise was about to become a declaration of war. The first attack came exactly 2 months ago on a Tuesday morning. I was getting ready for work when I heard a loud thunk from outside, followed immediately by the sound of a vehicle speeding away. By the time I made it to my front yard, the beast was already disappearing around the corner, leaving my beautiful mailbox post cracked and tilted at a dangerous angle. There was no note, no apology, no acknowledgement that anything had happened. I spent my entire evening after work, fixing the damage carefully, realigning the post, and reinforcing the track. Everyone makes mistakes, I told myself, giving people second chances. But deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't going to be an isolated incident. 2 weeks later, my worst fears were confirmed when it happened again. This time, I was home to witness the attack firsthand. Sandra was behind the wheel of the beast, and I watched in disbelief as she deliberately swerved toward my mailbox, crushing it completely, before accelerating away without even slowing down. The casual, almost recreational nature of the destruction made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm and follow proper procedures. I marched over to their house and knocked politely on their front door, planning to have a reasonable adult conversation about the situation. What I got instead was a masterclass in gaslighting and victim blaming. Monica answered the door with a smirk that told me everything I needed to know about her attitude toward the situation. She examined her perfectly manicured nails while delivering her verdict with the casual cruelty of someone announcing the weather. "You put your mailbox too close to the road," she said, not even bothering to look at me. "That's your fault for creating a hazard." Behind her, Sandra appeared and added with genuine. "Maybe you should get a sturdier one next time, or learn proper placement." The twins exchanged a look that confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. This wasn't random vandalism or even neighborhood drama. This was a calculated campaign of psychological warfare, and they'd just declared open hostilities against someone they saw as an easy target. The situation escalated into something truly sinister. A few days later, when I found a handwritten note stuffed inside my damaged mailbox. The message was brief but chilling in its implications. Things that aren't protected disappear. There was no signature, but the loopy, childish handwriting was unmistakably Monica's from the return address labels I'd seen on their packages. I stared at that note for a long time, feeling something fundamental shift inside my chest. This wasn't about mailboxes anymore. It was about territory dominance, the twins' need to establish themselves as the neighborhood's ruling class. Class. They'd chosen me as their first target probably because I seemed like a quiet computer programmer who wouldn't fight back. They were about to learn how wrong that assumption was. What really sealed my transformation from victim to adversary was witnessing their treatment of Mrs. Miller's dog. The next morning, I watched through my window as Sandra deliberately accelerated the beast toward the elderly woman's small terrier missing by inches before slamming on her brakes and screaming, "Keep that stupid mutt away from the road." The poor dog was terrified. Mrs. Miller was shaking, and Sandra was laughing like she'd just performed some brilliant comedy routine. That's when I realized these weren't just inconsiderate neighbors. They were genuine bullies who fed off other people's fear and helplessness. And like all bullies, they would keep escalating until someone finally stood up to them. That evening, I sat in my garage surrounded by the broken pieces of my mailbox, thinking about all the times I'd been bullied as a kid, and how the adults always told me to just ignore them and they'll go away. But bullies never go away on their own. They keep pushing until someone pushes back harder. As I swept up the splinters of wood that Marcus and I had so carefully shaped and painted, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to report this to ineffective authorities or hope for mercy from people who had none. I was going to solve this problem the way my mechanic father had taught me to solve all problems, with intelligence, preparation, and the right tools for the job. But what David didn't know was that Sandra had been watching him from her window, and she was planning something that would change everything. Type revenge if you think David should take matters into his own hands, or type police if he should try the authorities one more time. The third mailbox destruction happened exactly 6 weeks later. This time I was completely prepared for war. I'd spent the previous weekend installing a comprehensive high-definition security camera system, with multiple angles covering every inch of my front yard and focused specifically on the mailbox area. Marcus had called me that Sunday morning, excited about his engineering classes and asking how things were going at home. "Everything's fine, son," I told him while watching Sandra pace back and forth on her front lawn like a caged predator. "Just taking some security precautions." I didn't want to worry him with the gritty details of suburban warfare, but I had a growing certainty that the police were acting in the most brazen yet. At exactly 7:13 on a Tuesday morning, my phone exploded with alerts from the security system. I was drinking my morning coffee when the familiar sound of the beast's engine began revving aggressively outside. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the live camera feed just in time to watch Sandra accelerate directly toward my mailbox with the determined focus of a kamikaze pilot. The impact was absolutely devastating. My third mailbox in 2 months was reduced to splinters and twisted metal in a matter of seconds. But this time was different. This time I had captured every single detail in crystal clear courtroom quality high-definition video. The footage was so perfect that it looked like something from a Hollywood action. Every detail was preserved in stunning clarity. Sandra's white knuckles gripping the steering wheel, her face twisted with malicious satisfaction. Monica in the passenger seat pumping her fists and cheering, like she was watching her favorite sports team score the winning goal. The beast's license plate was perfect as they sped away from its crime scene. I immediately backed up the video to 3 different cloud storage accounts with multiple copies on external drives. This was my smoking gun, and I wasn't going to let it disappear into the digital void. But before I could figure out how to use this evidence, my security cameras happened to even more damage to its carefully constructed image of innocence. Later that same afternoon, I watched Sandra sneak across the street to steal a package from the elderly couple directly opposite. She looked around nervously, like a common criminal, grabbed the box, and hurried back to her house, clutching it against her chest. This was perfect. Finally, I had evidence of criminal behavior that even the most reluctant police officer couldn't ignore. I decided to deploy this footage strategically as a test case for my larger plan. I posted the package theft video, first titling it simply, "Neighbor Caught Stealing Packages," without mentioning the twins by name. Within 24 hours, it had accumulated over 50,000 views and hundreds of comments from outraged viewers. The pressure from social media attention forced Sandra to return the package to its rightful owners, though she denied everything and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. But the damage to her reputation was already done. The entire neighborhood now knew exactly what kind of people we were dealing with. More importantly, I'd proven that my camera system worked perfectly and that the internet was hungry for justice. Emboldened by this small victory, I decided to take my evidence to the proper authorities and give the system one last chance to work correctly. I printed out high-resolution screenshots from the mailbox attack, prepared a detailed timeline of all incidents, and marched confidently into the police station with my folder of evidence. Officer Wilson, a tired-looking man in his 50s, who seemed to view every complaint as a personal inconvenience, barely glanced at my carefully prepared documentation before delivering his devastating verdict. "This looks like a civil matter to me," he said while sliding my photos back across his desk with obvious disinterest. "Unless someone gets physically hurt, there's really not much we can do. Maybe try talking to your homeowners association about it." His dismissive tone made my chest tight with frustration.
K-12 makes going back to school easy. We deliver an education that takes your child beyond the classroom. Interactive curriculum, innovative technology, and personalized learning tailored to your child's needs. Forget the stress of shopping. We send you everything you need to start the school year off right. Just open the door, open the box, and open up
Frustration, but I maintained my composure and tried one more appeal to his sense of justice. "Officer Wilson, this is clearly intentional property destruction, caught on camera," I said, pointing to the crystal-clear images of Sandra's attack. "How is this not criminal vandalism?" He sighed heavily and gave me the look reserved for naive citizens who don't understand how the real world works. "Between you and me," he said in a lower voice, "those ladies have had some troubles lately, and they're probably just acting out. Give them some space and this will probably blow over." What I didn't know at the time was that Wilson had been posting pictures from dinner parties at Sandra and Monica's house on his social media accounts. The fix was already in. Later that evening, I discovered Wilson's social media posts showing him at dinner parties at Sandra's house laughing and toasting with the twins. The system wasn't just broken, it was actively working against me. The homeowners association was even more useless than the police. When I called to schedule an emergency meeting, I was told the next available appointment was in 3 weeks. Apparently discussing mailbox vandalism wasn't considered urgent enough to interrupt their regular schedule. When I explained the serious nature of the situation and mentioned that I had video evidence of criminal behavior, the secretary's tone became noticeably colder. "Mr. David," she said with obvious irritation, "neighbors really should work these things out amongst themselves without involving the association in petty disputes." What I later discovered was that this secretary was Sandra's old college roommate, and my complaint had been marked as resolved before I even finished explaining the situation. That night, sitting in my garage surrounded by the debris of my third destroyed mailbox, I experienced something I'd never felt in my 45 years of life. For the first time since childhood, I broke down and cried, not from pain or fear, but from pure frustration and the crushing weight of systemic betrayal. I even started typing a resignation letter, thinking maybe I needed to take stress leave from work. It disappeared until this nightmare resolved itself somehow. But then my eyes fell on Marcus's photo sitting on my workbench. A picture of us on the mailbox together, both of us grinning and covered in paint, proud of our father-son creation. I deleted that resignation letter and made a completely different decision. I